Now it is time to subclass NSWindow. Let's go back to Xcode and create a new class. We'll do this by right-clicking on the classes group, choosing Add and New File. We're going to select Objective-C class. Click Next, and let's name this one TM Main Window. Click Finish. The only change we need to make to the header file is changing NSObject to NSWindow. This way we're subclassing NSWindow instead of NSObject. I'll go ahead and save this. I'm going to use Command-Option-Up arrow to get over to our implementation file. If we open up the documentation, so I'm going to go to Help, Developer Documentation, and go to the NSWindow class reference, we can see that the task creating windows, that we have two instance methods that we can implement to create a window. Now the first one is init with content rect, style mask, backing, defer. Let's choose that one. Now this is not as bad as it sounds. For our purposes, we will simply pass the values we received during application launch on through to our superclass NSWindow. There's only one method we will be overriding, and that is setContentBorderThickness for edge. To get things started, let's triple-click on this method, and we'll copy it to the pasteboard. I'm going to use Command-M to minimize the documentation, and I'm just going to paste this inside of our class. Now to make this easier to read, I'm going to go over right before Style Mask and hit Return. I'm going to do the same thing before backing and defer. And that'll line it up real nice, making it easier for us to read. Now like I said, the way we'll set this up, we'll take the values that we receive when our application is launching and pass those on up to our superclass NSWindow. And we'll let it do all of its initialization first. So to do that, we're going to say self, and self is our class. That's the TM main window class, that object itself. And we're going to say super, and super means NSWindow because that's what we're subclassing. And I'm going to pass in the same thing, the init with content rect. And I get my code completion pop up there. I'm going to pass in the values we have in our method above. So this will be content rect. And if you don't remember, you can go between the tab stops by using Control/. So our style mask is window style. The backing is buffering type. And our defer is defer creation. I'll end that with a semicolon. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go right before style mask and hit return, before backing and defer. And I actually need a closing brace there. Our next step is to check and see, did that actually happen? So we're going to say if self. So we're checking here that super did return and was able to initialize everything correctly. If it did, it'll come back and we'll initialize self with all of those values. And here we're going to override one method. And this is going to be setContentBorderThickness. And this is asking for a CG float. We're just going to make this 32.0. And the edge is NSMinYEdge. And the last thing we'll need to do is return self. So let's go over again what this does. When our application launches, this method will be called on the NSWindow. Now we're going to subclass NSWindow in Interface Builder. So it's going to know to send this method onto our class to see what we want to do with it. It's going to provide all of these values for our init method. We're in turn going to pass those up to super and let the NSWindow superclass handle all of its initialization methods, and that will return an NSWindow object and place it into self. Down here we check and make sure that it did come back and everything's okay. And if it is, we're going to override one method, setContentBorderThickness. Give it 32.0 for edge, NSMinYEdge. And at the end, we just return ourself. Now you might be asking yourself, for one, how did I know to set content border thickness? Where did I get that method? And how did I know to use NSMinYEdge? Well, let's go to the documentation and see. I'm going to hold down the Option key and double click on Set Content Border Thickness. I'll get this pop-up window. I'm going to go to the top where the book icon is, click that, and it's going to open up the documentation and go right to where that method is. So here we see it says specifies the thickness of a given border of the window. If we come down here, we can see it's an NSRect edge. And in the parameters, we see that border thickness is the thickness for the edge in points, and in the edge is asking for the border whose thickness to set. And here we have two options, the top border and the bottom border. Now the top border is NSMax Y edge. And if we look in the discussion, it says, in a non-textured window calling set content border thickness for edge, if we pass NSMax Y edge, this will raise an exception, because it is only valid to set content border thickness of the top edge of a textured window. Now we're not using a textured window, and we only want to set the bottom edge anyway, so that's why we passed in NSMin Y edge. So I just wanted you to see that and not be lost as to where I found those values. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. And the last step that we have to do to make this actually work in our code is we have to go back to Interface Builder. We have to select our window, which this is not the window we want to use. We want to go to our main window. And with the window selected, I'm going to come over to the inspector and go over to Identity, and we're going to change the class from NSWindow to TMMainWindow. I'll hit Tab, and now we have our class being the actual class of this NSWindow. So let's save this. Let's go back to Xcode, and we'll build and run. And when the application launches, we can see that we have our nice gray border at the bottom of our window. Now I also see that there's a small gray line right there, right above our bottom border. So we'll want to make an adjustment in that inside of Interface Builder. Go ahead and try to fix that on your own. And as a small assignment, create a new class called TM Credentials Window using the same code that we put inside of our TM main window, and set the Credentials window up to use the TM Credentials Window class, just like we did here with the main window.